Think about this scenario for a moment. You're going down to the grocery store to buy a gallon of milk for $2, and that's your expected price, but then you end up going there and it's actually double the price at $4 a gallon. You might end up still buying that gallon of milk even though it's a higher price, because how else are you going to eat Cinnamon Toast Crunch, which we all know is the best cereal out there? But let's say you go into that same grocery store to buy a chocolate bar, and instead of it being $2, it's actually $4. That candy bar better have a golden ticket in it, otherwise I'm not buying it. So even though in both scenarios, both things are things that you don't necessarily need but you really want, and on top of that the price increase was still the same, it ends up impacting you a little bit differently. Part of this has to deal with something known as a substitution effect. All this really means within a given product category, the more options I have, the less I'm willing to tolerate any price increase. Think about this with meat. You have plenty of options that are fairly cheap. You can make a beef pot roast or baked chicken, and even though I only listed 2, there are definitely plenty of options. Now compare that with milk or cereal. I'm not necessarily trying to substitute OJ or tea to pour in my cereal, although I did do that in 5th grade on a dare. Okay, so I'm willing to tolerate a bigger price change when I have less options. Big deal, so what? Well, this concept actually may be more applicable and have a bigger impact than you may think. Think about smoking for a second. So let's say you're trying to curb the amount of smoking that happens in a country, and since you know that there's not really that many substitutes when it comes to smoking, then price increases may not necessarily be the best options to curb the demand for smoking. Sure, there's a lot of different brands out there, but there's not necessarily a perfect substitute when it comes to smoking. So then in that case, you could tolerate a $5 or even $10 price increase, even though with something like bread, that price increase would have a dramatic impact on that demand. So this poses a problem because when it comes to government regulations, taxes are probably one of the best tools that governments have out there to kind of sway different people in different ways. And in fact, different countries out there have played around with different options. For example, one of the best ways to curb smoking demand in different countries is actually to have some kind of graphic type picture on the actual labeling, and that has a much more dramatic impact on the demand than say a $10 or even $20 price increase. And this whole relationship between price and the amount of demand that's out there, it's what's known out there as the elasticity of demand. Now compare that case with something that has plenty of different substitutes and options. You're going to the grocery store to buy a Twix bar or a Snickers bar or some type of chocolate bar, and let's just say for the sake of argument that you like all of them equally, even though we all know that Twix is the best. So you go to the grocery store and you realize that a Snickers bar is actually 10 cents cheaper than a Twix bar. You're probably going to go for that Snickers bar because you like them both the same, so you care about price a little bit more. This is exactly how you end up with price wars when products or businesses or different services are pretty much similar, so then the only way they can compete is on price. For example, things like frozen vegetables or paper towels, or even things like phone cases where they're pretty much all serving the similar purpose, ends up competing heavily on price. Now this is something that some companies out there handle very well. Think about companies like Apple or Rolex or even Gucci, for example. They have built up such a strong brand identity that there really is no perfect substitute for that product. And in fact, there's huge potential financial gains for these different companies because think about the high markup that these companies tend to have for their different products. It all relates back to this feeling of feeling like there's no perfect substitute. And because you feel like there's no other options out there, you're willing to tolerate a much higher price just so you can end up having that product because there's no other option. And obviously this is not an easy thing to achieve for a different company, and they have to spend massive amount of marketing dollars to build up that brand identity. So why does this matter to my personal life, and why do I care about elasticity of demand? Well, the truth is that many companies and even salesmen know the tricks as far as how price impacts your overall demand, and they use it to their benefit. Let's say, for example, you walk into a bank and you want to compare their best loan option as far as getting a house compared to a different bank. Let's say this particular bank just focuses on price and is not necessarily focusing on trying to distinguish themselves by offering more services to you. So when you actually try to walk out the door, they try to convince you that all different banks out there offer about the same price and it's not really worth your time going out there to compare different loans. But yet the reverse happens when you go into a bank that focuses more on service and can't necessarily compete on price. When you try to walk out the door because you want to go see the different loan options out there, they'll try to convince you that sure, other different banks will undercut them as far as the rate, but that they offer services that no other different company can offer. What they're trying to do is basically distinguish themselves and basically make it known in your mind that there's no necessarily a great substitute for them as far as a different company. And to add, this is also what a lot of salesmen do very well, which is to really distinguish the product that they're trying to sell. Make it sound as unique and as personal, and that there's no other option out there for you. So that's why you need to buy, and that's why you need to buy right now from them. So how do you combat people that are using price elasticity to their advantage? Well, the key here is to really understand your wants and values and whether or not price is more important to you versus something like additional services that may be tacked onto a product. If you only care about price, make sure you realize that going into some kind of purchase agreement. For example, if I'm buying a car and I only care about price, don't let a salesman convince you otherwise on why this unique car is worth a premium price. On the flip side, what you can do is make sure you put a hard value on the additional service being offered. For example, if I value price as far as buying a car, maybe I actually do care about, additional services that may be offered for that car. For example, if I value that additional service that they're offering, for example, additional coverage on their warranty, I should value that at $1,000 and compare that to a car that doesn't necessarily offer that service. So that way you're kind of evening out the playing field in your mind mentally. The same actually happens as far as job offers. Think about job offers out there that can't necessarily offer you the best salary. They try to get your focus and attention onto things that aren't necessarily salary based. For example, some kind of perk that they offer. The best way to combat that though is to make sure you have a hard value in your mind as far as that perk or different service that they're offering to you. For example, if it's additional PTO or if it's flexible hours, work hours, then make sure you actually have a hard value on that and then compare that to another job offer and that salary. In the end, elasticity of demand has huge implications that go beyond just the individual. I won't go too far into it, but I will give at least one relevant example. Think about different products that are traded between two different countries, and especially products that are very valuable and relevant and there's not necessarily a substitute for. For example, if Japan is selling some kind of microchip to the United States, and it's a microchip that's very unique to that country that only that country produces, then implementing some kind of tariff or tax on that product is not necessarily going to have an impact on the demand for that product. The reverse could be true as well. For example, let's say every country out there sells grain, and the United States is trying to buy grain, but it implements some kind of tariff on the grain that Mexico sells. Then there's a good chance that the demand for Mexico grain is going to drop dramatically because from the United States perspective, they have plenty of different options as far as buying that grain elsewhere. If you appreciated this video at all, please give it a thumbs up. And if you like personal finance, business, or economics, or if you have a topic that revolves around those different fields, please comment down below and I'd be more than curious to look into talking about it in a future video. That's it for this video, and I hope to see you in the next one.